Welcome to Blaze News, the mandate day 7. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, the Senate held its confirmation hearing for Kash Patel as FBI director. And just days before his hearing, Patel was the victim of a smear from an anonymous whistleblower. And today, he defended himself against the Democrats' accusations.
If the best attacks on me are going to be false accusations and grotesque mischaracterizations, the only thing this body is doing is defeating the credibility of the men and women at the FBI. I stood with them here in this country. In every theater of war we have, I was on the ground in service of this nation. And any accusations leveled against me that I would somehow put political bias before the Constitution are grotesquely unfair. And I will have you reminded that I have been endorsed by over 300,000 law enforcement officers to become the next director of the FBI. Let's ask them.
Well, yeah, let's ask them. The Senate also held Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing today. Tulsi took the opportunity to address claims that she's the puppet of Russia, Donald Trump, or Assad. Here's what she had to say about those.
The American people elected President Trump with a decisive victory and mandate for change. The fact is, what truly unsettles my political opponents is I refuse to be their puppet.
Tulsi knows about the mandate, and she also called the FBI's politicization and the use of FISA during Donald Trump's first term.
The American people elected Donald Trump as their president not once but twice, and yet the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation specifically to help Biden win the election.
And last night, an American Airlines flight collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter near the Ronald Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C., and at least 28 bodies have been recovered from the Potomac River, and authorities do not expect to find any survivors. In a press conference today, Trump asserted what he thought caused the crash.
That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense. Okay. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
Now let's bring in Blaze News editor-in-chief, Matthew Peterson. So, Matthew, we get another huge day of confirmation hearings, right? RFK Jr. not mentioned, but he is still going on today. But the stars front and center are Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a day where I look back and I say, again, the momentum is still going in the right direction. So, yeah, you had people chitter-chattering about Kash Patel, but did any of that really land? I mean, is this convincing anyone? No, absolutely not. Kash Patel is enormously popular with the base for good reason. And Tulsi Gabbard, who, she's having there's some problems there. Like that might be rough, because so many people hate her and the intelligence community is so powerful. She was able to say some outrageous truths, right, in public and remind everyone that all of this was revealed when they started spying on a presidential candidate, using the force of government to spy on a legitimate presidential candidate and nominee. And it was disgraceful then, it's disgraceful now, and it's disgraceful that people won't accept the very nominees who would actually bring us justice and put an end to this.
Well, and Tulsi Gabbard herself knows about TSA, watching her as she goes through every flight and having extra marshals on the plane that she would be on. So she's lived this life as well. But they're afraid of them, people like Kash and Tulsi, because they're instruments of change. They would signify some real difference making in D.C. And I would look at that and think, knowing that the Democrats have that to go up against, they would have a very thoughtful countermeasure. I don't think that we've seen that yet.
No, we've seen them, throw some sticks and stones that seem pretty random at some of these people, like Hegseth, or but there's nothing new, there's nothing surprising, there's nothing substantial. This is just what you'd expect them to sort of say, and that's what's really interesting to me about what's going on is, I think they sort of know that momentum is moving in one direction. And I don't see them taking a scalp. And of course, the maddening thing for them is that if they don't, if they can't prevent this, these are people who do not care about popularity in Washington, D.C. These are people who care about righting the ship, which has been going in the wrong direction now for a very long time. And, keep in mind, this isn't 2016, right? The depth of the corruption has been exposed. So both Kash Patel and Tulsi, the whole claim they have to the office is, I'm going to go fix this. And this is the career bureaucrats in the permanent state that has been exposed to the American people over the last 8 years.
Of course, we're not to the vote yet, but if you look at the vote that we had to go through with Pete Hegseth, we knew the actors that were going to be involved, right? And it's going to be Mitch McConnell and Thom Tillis and Murkowski and Collins. A lot of them are still, I don't think that they are as forcefully against one. Tillis was out there today, like championing Kash Patel right when he started today. So it doesn't look like it's going to be even as uphill of a battle as a Pete Hegseth has already faced.
What's interesting is how the herd animal, right? The herd animal that is the U.S. Senator. Think about this. United States Senator has 6 years. Right. That they're insulated. The joke is they can do whatever they want in the first, 3-4 years. No one even cares. They're not going to be elected. Everyone will forget about it, so they can vote however they want. They have the most freedom, right, of almost any office in America. You're elected for 6 years to an entire state. And these are people that in the cases you're talking about are such herd animals. They're constantly, can I get away with this? Can I actually show what I really think? And I don't like these nominees, or do I have to go along? And when they think the herd's going the right way, boy, they will all get in line and go. That's why I always say moderate Republicans are not the biggest problem many times. There's real uniparty evil actors, but moderate Republicans will go the right way if they just are pressured enough because they follow peer pressure because they don't have a spine. And it's pathetic to see and to think about a United States Senator acting that way. What if Thom Tillis actually had principles, right? Or if he voted his principles all the time, what would happen? I don't know, but you're never going to see that happen. But it's good that the wind is blowing. They sense the wind is blowing in the right direction, and a lot of them are going along.
That's not a realistic look at D.C. as it currently stands, but I hope one day we can get there. Now, RFK Jr., he was on the stand again today, and we're going to look at making America healthy again, because when we come back, don't go anywhere. Dr. Peter McCullough will be giving us his insights on everything from vaccines to the WHO. Next. Well, it's a new year, and now it's time to focus on what matters most. That's creating healthier habits, enjoying more moments at home with your family, and definitely spending less money going out to eat. GoodRanchers.com is here to help you turn all your resolutions into solutions. When you buy your meat from Good Ranchers, you're directly supporting local farms and ranches in the United States, and you can skip all of that imported meat from the grocery store. Good Ranchers delivers high-quality, 100% American meat straight to your door, so you can start 2025 with better choices, better meals, and better moments at home. Visit GoodRanchers.com and use my code Jill to claim $25 off, free express shipping, and your choice of free ground beef, chicken, or salmon in every order for an entire year. So if spending more time with your family and less money going out to eat and trying to enjoy some quality, nutritious American food, if that's all on your resolutions list this year, then be sure to visit GoodRanchers.com and use my code Jill for meat that delivers just that. GoodRanchers.com. Use code Jill to claim $25 off and free meat in your box for a year. GoodRanchers.com. American meat delivered. One of Trump's first actions as president was withdrawing the United States from the World Health Organization. How will this impact the United States health policies, though? So here to break it down for us, we brought in Dr. Peter McCullough. He is a world-renowned cardiologist, and he is the chief scientific officer of the wellness company. Easy for me to say now. Dr. McCullough, you've been advocating for us to leave the WHO for some time, and you recently told Laura Ingraham that it's a money pit. Let's go ahead and watch that clip.
The WHO is a global money pit, is what it is. We have plenty of capabilities at the CDC. Our healthcare is not influenced at all by the WHO in the United States.
So how is this going to go, right? With the United States withdrawing from the WHO, how is this going to affect us and them?
It's going to liberate us. The WHO was advancing what's called a pandemic treaty alliance, international health regulations that would have constrained us and bound us to what the WHO wants to do with respect to plants, animals, humans. This involved farming, future pandemic response, and it was going to be binding by international law. And as I mentioned, the WHO is expensive. Billions of our taxpayer dollars went into this, and we weren't seeing the return.
How is it going to hurt the WHO? Because I'm okay with that. I'd like to see that happen. But does this damage them in some significant way?
It's about a 20% budget cut. And in the WHO's response back to Trump, it was interesting. They wrote a letter back to Trump and said, listen, we don't want to see you go. The United States has been in the WHO since 1948. And they said, listen, we've been trying to improve accountability and get cost effectiveness for the last 7 years. And I think Trump said, that's enough. Your budget's cut.
I look at this and I wonder how it would be different if we had a pandemic like a COVID-19 and we didn't have to worry about being in an organization like a WHO. How would that have played out in a different way?
If we would have been completely independent, and if other countries would have been independent, we would have seen a variation in terms of pandemic response. We would have seen the natural genesis of innovation. But because the WHO controlled all the communications through, remember, 193 member nations, over 140 national focal points, they gave the orders through the pandemic. And you remember these talking points that were issued on the same day, and they came out all over the world. One of them was, no one is safe. It came out on the same day. Another one about 18 months later came out, crisis of the unvaccinated, all coordinated by the WHO national focal points.
Won't be sorry about this one at all. Very happy to see that. Let's talk about RFK Jr. a little bit, though, because this is one of the headlines of the week, these confirmation hearings. There's a lot to unpack there. I was thinking today, if someone had told me a year ago, right, I think a lot of senators would maybe not have voted to confirm him. There's a lot of momentum right now. But what do you think about RFK Jr. and his qualifications?
Well, think about the context of this. We're 9 days into the new administration, shock and awe, 300 executive orders, pulling out of the WHO, ending government censorship, restoring the military. If they declined the vaccine and the vaccine mandates, they're being restored. And the list goes on and on. Now Kennedy, nominated for Secretary of HHS. Remember before him, we had Alex Azar, actually, who was installed under Obama, continued under Trump, and then Xavier Becerra under Biden. Do you remember any controversy or them going through their perfunctory hearings? No. The tension here is that RFK has popular support big time. That room is packed in the Senate, packed. And the senators all know that what's on the line for them, particularly those on the left, is the lobbyist money. And so they've been giving their talking points, make your statements, win points with your lobbyist support, and then try to go after RFK with everything you have. I don't think the public is buying this at all. They see right through it, and they support RFK.
Yeah, we saw RFK go back and forth with Bernie Sanders, and he said, you're one of the biggest pharma lobbyists. You take all that money, and he's like, only $1.5 million, right? There's $200 million. I don't take all of it, but it's so interesting to me because you see RFK, and he is popular, and he is having a moment, right? MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, is an entire thing that a lot of people in the Trump coalition were able to get behind during the campaign. So what do you hope to see him come through and change for America and the health system overall?
Well, let's just say that there's a lot of watchers. This is being broadcast everywhere. There are people watching this, reporting back to the senators and saying, listen, we're watching the body language here. There was cheers. People listened to Kennedy who spoke with great sincerity when he said, who doesn't want to see America get healthy again? So when he is confirmed, and I still think he has to get through, past that threshold, when he's confirmed, there will be great expectations, and he will assume basically a behemoth. There's over a dozen sub-agencies reporting in. We have the regulatory bodies, the FDA, research, NIH, CDC, huge budgets, lots of talent. But I think we can expect what he said in the hearings: radical transparency, accountability, and the end of corruption.
Accountability. Let's talk about accountability. What do you think his priorities should be in regard to the COVID vaccine?
I would like to see, the dream, although I don't know if the country has the will to do this. When I mean the country, I mean the people as well as the medical orthodoxy. I'd like to see them remove the vaccines from the market. The pandemic is essentially over. The vaccines, no clinical trial ever showed a reduction in hospitalization and death. No valid observational study showed that. Now in the journal Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law McCullough Foundation has published, Nick Hulscher, first author, that there is a chorus of calls, I'm not alone, to have the vaccines leave the market now. And then we need to move on to other issues.
Well, when you talk about accountability, we have to bring in Joe Biden and his presidential pardon that he has already given to one Anthony Fauci. I would love to dive into this with you because, one, the timing of everything, of the pardon, was interesting and of note. But what do you think could still happen in the health world that could still go through and have this reckoning for COVID-19?
Keep in mind, it was a preemptive pardon. Preemptive, meaning that, a crime hasn't, been uncovered yet, but there is an intent from the Biden administration to provide this blanket coverage, essentially like what we consider a tail coverage. And it goes back 10 years. And 10 years is almost to the exact time when Obama put into place the ban of gain-of-function research. And I think this is going to be the big issue. 2 papers, Menachery, first author, Ralph Baric, senior author, where they describe the creation of primordial SARS-CoV-2. This is in the peer-reviewed literature, Nature Medicine, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They say in these papers, they disclose it's gain-of-function research. It was started before the ban, and they believe grandfathered in. It was supported by Fauci and his branch, NIAID at NIH. And they thank Peter Daszak at the EcoHealth Alliance, now the debarred from HHS researcher, who shuttled the plans from UNC Chapel Hill to Wuhan, China. Now, even this week, the CIA agrees that the virus was engineered in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
So do you know, because this is something we have people researching now. I have, as editor-in-chief at Blaze, we've done interviews with a number of people. I mean, obviously, you've been on this network a bunch. Richard Ebright did an interview with our managing editor a while back. There's going to be a show called The Cover-Up, will be coming out within the week, that's going to dive into this. But I'm wondering, like, the pardon is there. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt for a minute. The pardon is there, I guess they would say, because he might be unjustly prosecuted for crimes. This is the best case I could think of, for crimes that were committed during this 10-year period. So do we know what the punishments would be? I mean, what specific laws they're protecting him from? It's a tough question, but it would appear that it has something to do with illegal research. Is that right?
I think it's more broad than that.
Okay.
And recall that most of these Biden pardons were overtly stated that Trump was going to retaliate against people who sought to do Trump harm. Remember, Fauci and Trump never had discord.
Right.
To this day,
Right.
Trump has not said anything about Fauci. Now, there are books written about what happened and what Fauci's role is in this great controversy. Peter Bregan was the first one, then The Real Anthony Fauci by Robert F. Kennedy. Rand Paul has a paper out, a book on this out now. So it's well delineated. I think the mechanism would be a special prosecutor to investigate Fauci as a target, meaning that, as someone who's a perpetrator for 2 major crimes, fraud, that he misled the country intentionally on the origins of SARS-CoV-2, attempted to cover up the Wuhan Institute of Virology and his role in the creation of SARS-CoV-2. And the next big one was mass negligent homicide. Now, that's a big one. But by the mechanisms that Fauci worked to suppress all our efforts on treating people early and preventing hospitalizations and deaths early in the pandemic, and then he relentlessly promoted only one solution, mass vaccination.
With that in mind, Senator Ron Johnson has been all over this. He's been one of the good ones there in D.C. He subpoenaed HHS for the documents on the development and the safety of the COVID-19 vaccines. And some of that included emails back and forth with Anthony Fauci. So when you know what you know now, what do you expect to see in some of those communications that Anthony Fauci is likely going to have out there?
Remember, a lot of these emails are in the 500 and plus page report from the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Origins. Brad Wenstrup was the chair. And in these emails, you can see what they were doing. They knew they were breaking the law. They knew they were going to get in trouble. They were actually typing in code. So they would put a $sign or an ampersand in place of a letter. And David Morens, who is Fauci's understudy at the NIH, even mentioned the FOIA lady. There was somebody who worked in Fauci's area who knew how to deflect these FOIA requests.
Now, let's say that the pardon stands. I mean, there's a whole argument to be made whether you can preemptively pardon someone like this. That's a serious argument that we're going to be talking about, I think, at this channel for a long time. But let's say it does stand. Are there other means and other people that should be punished legally?
Well, remember, a special prosecutor would be federal crimes. There certainly can be civil cases brought forward. And other people in the conspiratorial team were not protected. So Peter Daszak, not protected and already implicated because he's been debarred from HHS funding. So there's already, a conclusion that, he committed wrongdoing. We have Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. We have a whole conspiratorial team at the Rocky Mounted Research Center in Hamilton, Montana, where a 2018 paper came out and they had Barrick's virus and they were trying to get it to pass in Egyptian fruit bats. I mean, we could just go in the peer-reviewed literature and start to piece this together and say, wait a minute, the U.S. was knee-deep in coronavirus research that was trying to make it more transmissible and more lethal, and we got burned.
Last question for you. How likely do you think that it will be that we actually get real accountability on what happened with COVID-19?
I would forecast about a 20-year period of time. It's going to be very similar to the Great Tobacco Settlement. It's going to take that long a period of time because people are so deep into this now. They've staked out positions. Some have committed wrongdoing. Some have been on the wrong side of support. And it's very hard for someone to come out quickly and admit they're wrong and make things right.
Dr. Peter McCullough, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll explain why we're putting Senator Thom Tillis under the spotlight. Coming up. Well, how far will a teacher go to save a kid on the brink of losing everything? From Angel Studios, the studios behind Sound of Freedom, comes Brave the Dark. It's an inspiring true story about a troubled teen that's struggling to survive in a world that's let him down. He's haunted by torturous childhood memories. Nate Williams finds himself engulfed in darkness when his drama teacher, Mr. Dean, bails him out of jail and takes him in. Now, Nate must confront his past before it leads to his own destruction. Brave the Dark reminds us that one meaningful connection can change everything. This powerful film will leave you uplifted and inspired as it shows the strength of compassion and the impact of never giving up on someone. I encourage everybody to go see Brave the Dark. It's in theaters now. Get your tickets today at angel.com/Jill. That's angel.com/Jill. Tonight in the spotlight, Senator Thom Tillis, yet another Republican that's exposed for playing both sides in the fight between Trump and the establishment. According to the Wall Street Journal, Tillis personally encouraged Hegseth's former sister-in-law, Danielle, to come forward with damaging allegations of alcohol abuse and spousal mistreatment and assured her that this would sway key votes, including his own. He didn't deny saying this, explaining how her statement did carry some weight. So he spent days investigating whether there was any firsthand cooperation reports of this statement. But when it came down to the vote, he flipped. He cast the 50th vote to confirm Pete Hegseth and acted like none of this ever happened. Now, we got what we want, but the GOP establishment still believes that it can undermine Trump's America First agenda while pretending to be on board when it's convenient. But the base sees right through it. So now let's bring in Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford. So Chris, what does this say about the ongoing fight that we have between Trump and the establishment?
Now, if you look up Thom Tillis, Mitch McConnell, you'll get 1,000 news article results. Those two are absolute buddy-buddy. They work hand in glove together, and McConnell doesn't often like to do his own dirty work. He usually has other people do it. So Tillis is out there, and listen, and one half of me wants to give this guy a little bit of the benefit of the doubt and say, well, I mean, obviously, if a nominee turns out to be a spouse abuser, a wife beater, then that's someone that you really need to reconsider. But in an age post-Kavanaugh, you have to be either so naive or just deeply stupid or corrupt to actually take the word of an ex-in-law who's a partisan, never-Trumper Democrat who didn't have any firsthand knowledge of something, to fall for that sort of trap. And at the end of the day, I think people like Tillis have to end up looking, okay, I'm going to look at North Carolina. How did Donald Trump do here? Oh, he did really well. Do I want to keep my seat? Do I want him coming after me? Do I want to be the fourth vote against Hegseth? Because it's easy to be the fifth vote. It's easy to be the sixth vote. It's easy to be the third vote against him even. But that fourth one that actually makes the difference, that pushes it over, is a difficult place to be. And this is something that, unfortunately, you get this a lot with Republicans, even from red states, especially from red states, actually. I mean, Tillis opposed in the first administration Donald Trump sending emergency funds down to the border wall. How can you possibly justify that as a member of the Republican Party? He absolutely exemplifies one of those people who uses civility and decency and codes of decorum to try to hide the fact that he's not in it for a fight. He doesn't recognize the way the Democrats recognize, and some Republicans are starting to recognize, that he is engaged in a war for the future of this republic, essentially a cold political war for the future of the republic. But he wants to stick to these old rules, which basically say Republicans are controlled opposition, easily manipulated, and undermining themselves behind the scenes.
Now, Chris, the point of the spotlight is to really do a deep dive on what prevents the mandate and what propels the mandate forward that President Trump is carrying from the American people. And here today, we have something that I hope we do a lot more on this show this year. I can't wait to do it more, because this is spotlighting the bad guys. This is the bad guys and how they operate. These are the people who thwart the will of the people time and time again. And in this case, it's not just about how terrible Thom Tillis can be, but that this is a technique that Republicans have used, as you know, for years and years and years. And just to reiterate, like in the abstract, what's the principle here? Like there should be a Greek name for this. But what is he doing? He is... He is quietly, I bet you have a few names, but he is quietly stabbing the agenda in the back, right? Claiming I'm doing due diligence by looking deeply into this hit piece at the last second. He's stabbing the agenda in the back and then turning around and voting for it and continuing to wear his Republican skin suit. And this is not a one-off, right? I mean, this is something that happens time and time again.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see some of this next week from Tillis and his friends. You might see it with Cassidy on RFK after the way he pushed back at the questions. You might see it with Senator Young on Tulsi Gabbard, who didn't seem at all satisfied with the answers she gave, at least I guess. But at the end of the day, you also have to wonder, are they going to have the courage? Tillis didn't have the courage. McConnell doesn't care. McConnell's an old man. McConnell came in when Ronald Reagan was in office. But Tillis is relatively new. He's still in his 60s. I think this is his second term now. He wants to win re-election. He'd like to stick around. And he's kind of slowly having to come to realize this, that this is a changed D.C. and that the business is not going to go on as usual. It's going to be called out. And you're right. I mean, I think Keith Olbermann used to call it the worst person in the world segment. It's always insufferable, but I thought it was kind of a funny idea for a segment. Yes. The Daily Caller, when I was there, won worst person in the world multiple times. I think I won it once over a
Congratulations.
rude letter I sent some atheists.
Nice.
Thank you. It was a difficult time in life because I'd been responding to this Atheists Against the Boy Scouts group or something, and I just one time sent them a picture of Dick Cheney and said, "Here's a dick pic." I was like 23. But when our publisher got the phone call, an editor was sending dick pics to an atheist group. At first, he was really worried. But it turns out it's actually not a crime to send the state photograph of Dick Cheney to anyone. But this is an important thing. Democrats are so good at calling out people by name. I mean, just think about it. Under Donald Trump, you knew the name of his secretaries. You knew the name of his drivers. You knew the name of his undersecretary of this, most people, even political journalists under Joe Biden probably couldn't remember the name of his chief of staff, because Democrats and the newspapers make these different people famous, and not always because they're doing a good job. Sometimes it's because they don't like them. And drawing attention to that and pulling the sheets back and not just having it be some big amalgamous blob. Take the deep state apart. So many of it is actually exposing itself in its opposition to this mandate. You can figure out, put names to it, put faces to it. This isn't some kind of faceless machine that cannot be defeated. It's somewhere between Veep and how a Game of Cards, whatever that show was.
House of Cards.
They're not nearly as House of Cards. Yes, they're not as smart as they think they are. They're not as vicious as you think they are. They're just kind of bumbling people who do bad things repeatedly out of a mixture of cowardice and malice. And if you expose them, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that we're going to consistently do in this segment on the show. I mean, we're going to go after all those lesser names. I mean, today, is Senator Tillis, but there's a lot of staffers who still exist in all these agencies, and I can't wait, even as soon as next week, to start delving into some of their bios and who they are and what they're up to.
And Chris, I couldn't laugh harder this morning because then Thom Tillis came out and it was Kash Patel's hearing, right? And he was like, you know what? I'm going to have a shiny object. So anybody that saw that Wall Street Journal report about me and Pete Hegseth and that whole deal, maybe they'll forget it because I have the bingo card. So take a look.
Some may view this as an unserious caricature and not appropriate for this committee. Sadly, I consider it a serious caricature of what I expect to be witnessed today. I think we'll have words like enemies list and deep state. I've already X'd out 4 boxes in the opening statements alone. The fact of the matter is, some people will be here to simply substantiate a false narrative.
So I see that, and I think that Tillis has been on X, and he's seen now everybody that goes through and says, confirm Kash Patel. And he's like, you know what can I do to get myself out there and just have one more little positive PR bit before the end of the day?
Basically give him a fist bump. Come on, Kash, we're bros. Let's take a selfie together. And I get it. I mean, that's the thing with a lot of these Republicans and who serve the deep state are trying to do. They've got their chosen interests, whether it's Wall Street or foreign affairs or intel. And in his case, in McConnell's case, a lot of that is American foreign policy, a little bit of Wall Street as well, but foreign policy is the main thing. The FBI, he can afford to hug Trump's nominee. It's kind of like how Lindsey Graham does this. He's always Mr. Republican, showing up on Hannity's show, saying anything that you want to say to the base until it actually comes down for something he cares about. And then he'll turn on you in a second.
Well, I want to go back to Kevin Roberts. We had him on the show. He's the president of the Heritage Foundation. He was telling us on the show just last week that a vote against Hegseth, what that would mean.
A vote against Pete Hegseth is a vote for the deep state globalists. It's really that simple. The reason they're opposed to him is because he would bring much needed reform to an agency that is desperate for it.
So that just rounds out the entire thing of what we've been talking about this entire segment, Bedford.
Yeah, whether it's Hegseth or Tulsi Gabbard, who had a great line this morning in her opening when she said, people accuse me of being Assad's puppet or Putin's puppet or whoever, Donald Trump's puppet. But the reality is I'm just not their puppet, not someone that they can control, someone who answers only to them. And that's what Washington wants. That's what the deep state wants. They want people that what Donald Trump did that was so bad was that he didn't listen to them. He ignored them. He had his own mind. He went his own way. He didn't follow all of their policy prescriptions to a T. Even when he did things that made them happy, it didn't matter because he was just the wrong type of person doing it. And that's the same thing that Hegseth got, and that's another reason why, well, Kash Patel, he probably wouldn't want him anywhere near Department of Defense. He doesn't care. He wants to protect his little jewel and let Kash do whatever he wants with the FBI.
Yeah, Thom Tillis, if we just go through some of his greatest hits, you already mentioned the funding for the border wall, bipartisan legislation. If you have a red flag law, he was all for that as well. Censured by North Carolina GOP back in 2023. Not great on immigration stances. He wanted to have all that conservative alternative to the DREAM Act, but still drew ire from hardline conservatives. And his RINO score from Conservative Review was a 49, unfortunately, for Senator Thom Tillis there.
RINO, that's such a great name from the past. I love it. It's especially from back at the Tea Party days, but I totally get it, and it totally makes sense. McConnell's out for himself, and Tillis is Team McConnell, and that means that they're not Team you. There's a reason why why half the country, more than half the country, voted for Donald Trump, and at the same time, Mitch McConnell is the least popular and the most disliked politician in the country, and that reason is stuff like this.
Bedford, thanks so much.
Fantastic. See you tomorrow.
Matt, when you hear that, of course, we know Mitch McConnell's not for us. We know that you don't need the Democrats to fight. We have all the Republicans on our side that we need to fight first.
Yeah, but it's important that the point of this spotlight is it's important to realize these people will vote the right way when they have to, so it's really hard to tell what they're up to. In this case, you can actually see, we actually have a peek behind the scene, and you can see what Tillis tried to do to Pete Hegseth, or was interested in doing and making happen. But it didn't work, and he was able to backtrack, and then he votes for him. That's the kind of thing that happens day in and day out. This is something that Chris and everyone in D.C. won't stop reporting on, but it's something that you need to be aware of because they're going to pretend as much as they can.
And it was interesting earlier this week when we were talking about potentially a secret vote for Tulsi Gabbard. This is what they would rather have. They don't want everybody out there knowing the way that they are going to vote, because then they have to be held accountable to us, the people. And when we come back, we'll talk about what does real COVID accountability look like. We'll have your answers just ahead. Well, it's always a treat to have somebody like Dr. Peter McCullough come in studio with us. And with that in mind today, I wanted to ask you guys on X what you think real COVID-19 accountability looks like, because that's where we are at right now, trying to push everything forward with the mandate, with the agenda. What is it going to look like with COVID-19? Some of your responses. We start with Ashton. She said, putting people on trial. That's what real COVID accountability looks like to me. Now, Peterson, that is a very big deal. And I know Ashton watches the Steve Day show all the time. And Steve always says, after a fair trial, of course.
Yeah, he does say after a fair trial, of course. I think that she's right. I mean, there's no accountability unless wrongdoing is punished. And trials are what we need, actual courts of law. You heard today from Dr. Peter McCullough say this could be civil, which is absolutely true. There's a lot of different ways to go after wrongdoing, but I think that a lot of Americans who went through this feel like there has to be some real legal trial. These people really need to do that. And look, the right doesn't usually say, like, we're going to put all our opponents in jail. That was something the left has been all about for the last 9 years. But right now, yeah, we're going to need that.
Liberty Linda is also in agreement with all of this. She said criminal malpractice charges and charges for crimes against Americans, crimes against humanity. Nuremberg, too. She says never a congressional investigation. Right? It's basically like, we've heard your strongly worded letters. We need more.
Yeah, I mean, criminal malpractice. Again, it's people want this set in stone in some way, right? They really want the force of law, the rule of law to come into play. Whereas the investigation, we all know, it might be a kind of punishment that's public, right? That you've been shamed in some way if you care about what the Republican committee says. But we've seen this happen over and over again, and people just know in their gut it's not good enough. Not good enough this time.
Yeah, and Fred Bell answered, real COVID-19 accountability, it's not about a few people getting grilled on TV. It's about holding leaders and big pharma to the fire for the decisions that cost lives and made billions. No more passing the buck. And I think that is an important point, because people made so much money off of the decisions that were made, off of the actions that were taken. And you see it, that it cost lives. People's lives were at stake. People lost family members. And yet people just went through and said, oh, you know what? We can make a couple $2 billion off of this. So that's what they needed to do.
Yeah, I mean, Fred makes a great point, because it's about a lot more than political leadership, and it's about a lot more than the researchers who are doing terrible research they shouldn't have been engaged in and covering it up. This is actually also about, as you say, billions of dollars from large corporations that conservatives, sadly, have pretended for a long time could do no wrong. I mean, National Review had some article about how big pharma is back and it's good. And it's sort of like, we have no problem with corporations per se, but you're an insane person if in the year of our Lord 2025, you think you live in some kind of, cartoonish version of the free market where there's no collusion, etc. These companies did horrific things, and we need to expose how that system works so that everyone understands it and is on the same page when it comes to what to do about it.
Well, as Dr. Peter McCullough was saying when he was here, well, there were all of these other options that we could have had, but it got narrowed down to one thing. And that's all you could do. It was only going to be the vaccine or bust, even if you had other options on the table. No, don't look that way. Be herded over here into our one thing.
Yeah, just an absolute catastrophic failure in leadership on many levels from multiple sectors in dealing with the COVID-19 virus. To me, it is one of the biggest examples you could look at of what's wrong with the world in which we live.
Well, give us your closing thoughts, because I know justice is absolutely needed.
Yeah, so one of the things we're going to be talking about more on this show, for good reason, because there's so many of these incidents that have occurred over the last decade, is this concept of justice was actually really important. We have a friend, Matt Meehan, who will be on the show to talk about this. He's been talking about in the airwaves. This is really important to get right, and I just want to lay the groundwork for it right now. The reason that people are saying, that we need this response is because something needs to be repaired that has been damaged. And there's a lot that's been damaged. People's lives have been lost. Their livelihoods have been lost. Their reputations have been lost. And their trust that built up over time in various institutions and credentials has also been lost. So there really is a harm that's been done in many ways to many people because of this kind of wrongdoing. And if you're going to repair that, if you're going to move past that, if you're going to build a healthy society, a healthy civilization, and healthy institutions, then it's going to have to start by not papering over what the problem is. It's almost as if you're walking, in the landscape of reality today, not the landscape the media shows you, but the way the world actually is. And you have all these craters, right? From all these empty spaces where everything's just been bombed to hell by all the stuff that has happened. And that's the public square right now. So to repair that, you need to fill in those holes, and you have to bring about some justice. You have to bring justice about, which is about everything being in the right relationship to each other. So there is no way to move forward in America over the next 4 years of the Trump administration properly, and to build the foundation for the golden age and all the positive things that we want. There's no way to do that without providing justice, and that means punishing people who have done things that are wrong. There's also a practical result from this, which is very important, which is that it scares the crap out of people who might do it again, right? And it prevents people from doing bad things. Like, this is a crazy thing to have to say out loud, but we do, because of the insanity that's been going on in the academia and at what we've been taught for years. And one of those things is, it's as simple as, if you put people in jail for crimes, the crime will go down. I know people say that that's not true, but that is crazy nonsense. When we locked people up, my father was involved in this and in researching this. And when we lock people up, for instance, for drug use after it was getting out of control in the 80s, guess what happened? Crime went down. I mean, we don't believe that now, right? So when it comes to corruption, when it comes to everything that happened with COVID, when it comes to everything that the FBI did, this kind of stuff will continue, and we won't be able to build anew unless people who did wrong are punished for their actions.
So listen to this part. The Big Short is one of my favorite movies, right? And I watched it in theaters the first time. And at the end of the movie, the narrator's like, oh yeah, and all these people went to jail and they did all these things because it was so bad. And I was in the theater and I go, no, they didn't. But then he goes through and again, he says, oh no, I'm just kidding, right? Because in a financial crisis, no one went to jail.
Yes.
There was no reckoning for it. And we are now going to be in a very similar position in the near future because nothing was done the first time about it. We are now in a very similar situation when it comes to everything medical. So you see all of these different areas, right? It's going to be like whack-a-mole. It's going to be in the financial sector. It's in the health sector. It's all over right now. And I think people could feel that when Donald Trump was on the campaign trail without knowing maybe that these are the different things that are rising up. But you can feel that there's no accountability. And that's a problem.
Yes, we need someone to set things right. We're going to bring him back to do it. I think your point is a very important one. The 2008, 2009 crisis, right? In a way, like, yes, you're exactly right. No one was punished. All the big dogs got away with it and everything was fine, except the entire populist movement, right? That ended up coming through the Tea Party and beyond led to Donald Trump. And it led to the changing of the guard in the Republican Party and the entire sort of establishment falling apart. And so the Republican Party, in a sense, has been replaced by Donald Trump and his administration and totally redefined, whether you think that's good or bad, because of the fact there was no justice in what happened in 2008, 2009, and the right was not equipped to really bring that about. So you will get, right, you will get your due in this life, even though it doesn't work out perfectly where, you know, as the good book says, where everyone's rewarded perfectly in this life, but there's still going to be some rough justice that comes to you. It's just that's going to destroy things instead of build something new.
And if the Tea Party came out of the 2008 stuff and it eventually gave us Make America Great Again, I'm just wondering what this is going to look like 20 years from now. What this could potentially even morph into if everybody is this excited and this energized right now in the base.
If we lay the right foundation now and do these sorts of things now, this will be a lasting realignment that will last for decades.
I hope you're right, because that's definitely needed at this point in time. And we'll continue to point out all the good and bad Republicans here on the show. You know we will here on The Mandate. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll be back to break it all down tomorrow night.